So you just bought your new smoker and you're trying to figure out what the easiest thing to smoke is. And I'm gonna tell you right now, it's going to be pork shoulder or pork butt. It's more forgiving than pretty much all of barbecue because you can always moisten it up at the end if for some reason it comes out dry. And to be honest with you, it doesn't require a lot of attention. So today we're gonna do 2 pork butts. These are both boneless, and I know in many cases you're looking for bone in. They cook more evenly. People say they're better flavor. But to be honest with you, there were no bone-in pork butts available today at the store, and I went to Costco and Sam's Club. So, just like you, we're gonna roll with the punches and work with what we've got. Now, these came in a twin pack. It was a total of 14 pounds, so we have about 2 7-pound pork butts. And I noticed that one of them was really pretty much cut open. So I've seen it in the past where you can butterfly it to get a lot more bark. So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna butterfly one and we're gonna do the other one whole and intact. We're gonna show you the difference in how they turn out and the difference in times in which they cook. When it comes to a pork butt, there really isn't a lot of preparation. You don't need to trim off the fat. You don't need to shape it like you would a brisket. Most people, if anything, just score the fat cap. So for the whole one, that's what we're gonna do. And I'm just gonna cut a nice little diamond or square pattern in. And that's just gonna help with some of the bark, helps the seasoning get down in there and penetrate just a little bit more as well. And you know what, we might as well do the same on this one as well. I'm not gonna go as deep just because we're going to be butterflying this, so in the end it's gonna be a little bit thinner. You don't have to be super precise with this, just don't cut your fingers. Now, this is the one here that I'm gonna be butterflying. As you can see, it's already pretty much flapped open. Now, you can't really go wrong here except if you cut all the way through. So just make sure that you leave it open and don't cut all the way through. And I'm just gonna score this as well. Isn't as necessary as this isn't the fat cap, but just roughing up the surface is gonna help build that bark. And to be honest with you, there really isn't much more to do other than to put a little bit of a mustard binder on it. And we're just doing that to get the seasoning to stick. We don't have to do anything crazy. You can use oil. Most people choose mustard though. Now, we're gonna transfer these pork butts individually onto a cookie sheet. And the reason why is I'm gonna use it to kind of capture the seasoning so that I can kind of roll it around to make sure that we evenly coat the entire thing. And I'm just gonna start with this one right here. Now this is just a simple rub. This is salt, pepper, and garlic. We're using pepper, seasoned salt, kosher salt, and granulated garlic. I'll have the exact recipe down in the description. This is just a basic Texas barbecue rub. And because of the way we've got it mixed, there isn't too much salt, so you can put it on pretty heavy, and that's gonna help you make a nice crunchy bark. You can see this one was opened up a little bit too, but we're gonna keep that one intact. We're gonna cook these fat cap up as well. Let me get this butterflied one on here. By butterflying the pork shoulder, what that's gonna do is it's actually gonna allow us to get a lot more bark because we're exposing way more surface area to the heat directly and seasoning a lot more directly. Make sure that we're seasoning all sides here. I'm gonna trim that off. That's gonna be a problem. You have anything that's super thin or hanging off to the side, likely what's gonna happen is that's gonna cook way too fast and it's gonna end up burning and getting hard. So it's usually best to just trim off those hangers, like I call them. Now we're gonna cook both of these fat cap up on my Masterbuilt Gravity Series 800. I've got it set to 250 degrees. It is time to get these twin pork butts onto the smoker. Now with the Masterbuilt Gravity Series 800, I did a temperature test and found that the left side of the grill is the coldest. And so because of that, the butterflied one is going to go on that side and the whole one is going to go on the right side. So we've got it running at 250 degrees. We're gonna run it like that the entire time. I've got temperature probes in here, making sure that we are within spec and we're sticking around the 250. And also because this is an overnight cook, I mean, it's about 10 o'clock at night and these are just going on, I wanna make sure that the grill doesn't go out. Because this is a charcoal grill, you get about 8 to 10 hours out of that at this temperature. I just wanna make sure that it doesn't die out on me or flame out. So I'm gonna load it up with charcoal, and honestly, I'm probably gonna go take a nap because I know for the next 2 to 3 hours, we're not gonna need to do absolutely anything to these pork butts. So we'll come check in about 2 to 3 hours and show you what it looks like. We are about 4.5 hours in, and it's looking good. It's looking real good. Check the temperature. We're about 158, 160 degrees. The butterfly method is doing about the same. Surprisingly, at this point in the cook, we are at about the same place. So we're gonna give this some more time. We're gonna let that bark set up a little bit more before we wrap it. Ooh, softening up. Got a nice, rough, crunchy feel to them. We're at about 170 degrees on here. We're gonna pull these off and wrap them in some foil and get them back onto the smoker. So the pork shoulders are back on the Masterbuilt here, 250 degrees, and we're basically gonna be riding this until we reach about 203 degrees internally, or essentially we want that butter feel when we poke it with the probe. So it's gonna be in here, getting us through that stall period and just making some super tender frickin' barbecue. So one of the keys when you're doing a pulled pork or a brisket, it's all about feel. And when it starts to feel like there's no resistance, then it's time to pull it out. Checking this, we're at about 203, 204 degrees. And this pork shoulder here on the right is ready to come out. And so we're gonna just set this down into this foil pan here. And we're gonna let it rest, essentially let it cool down just a little bit. We've got the oven set for 170 degrees. We're going to essentially transfer this to the oven once it cools down a little bit, and we're gonna hold it there until it's time to eat. So I've got about 16 hours wrapped up into these twin pork shoulders. These were boneless, like I said, not the most ideal, but they're gonna do the job and they're still gonna make some awesome pulled pork. Now, we did one butterfly, we did one whole, and we basically treated them exactly the same with the rub, with the thyme, with everything. It's time to open them up, take a look, shred them, and honestly see what kind of damage we did. So I'm gonna start with the whole unbutterflied. And what I like to do is I like to get these foil pans for several reasons. One, because it makes it easy when you're resting it in case any juices leak out. And two, when I open this, if juices leak out, that's fine because I'm gonna shred the pork right here in this pan and we'll be able to mix those juices right back into the meat. And since I'm trying to accomplish that, instead of unwrapping it, I'm going to just kind of tear this open. Oh, and it is tender. I mean, look at that. It is literally falling apart. When it comes to pulled pork, now that it's rested, it's gonna be sitting about 160, 170 degrees. It's still gonna be hot. I suggest using glove liners, but it's best to just shred this by hand. And as you can see, I mean, that meat is just so tender. Look at that. It's literally just shredding with no effort whatsoever. But you can see, we got some nice color there from the smoke. Nice dark red, dark pink. The bark feels great. It's got a nice texture to it. And this stuff is super juicy. I mean, you can see that right there. That is a phenomenal looking pulled pork. Let's see what that butterflied version looks like. Now, the purpose for the butterfly is to create more surface area. So what does that mean? That's more places for the rub to be. That's more bark. And so if you're someone who really likes the rub, likes the bark, likes that texture on the outside, then I suggest the butterfly method. But before you go and try it, let's see how I did. And it, oh man, is that tender. Holy smokes. Oh, wow. All right, now I can tell you right now that this one is a lot, it has a lot more moisture than the other, than the whole. And even in the foil itself, there was a ton. So the bark here is a little different. It's not quite as crunchy feeling. It seems to be a little on the softer side, and that's just simply from being in those juices, sitting in those juices, basically braising during that resting period. Now, if we go side by side, now this was shredded, you know, it's already starting to cool down, so it is changing color just a little bit, as this one will as well. But just looking at it, you can see that there's a lot more pink in the butterflied version, and that's because of the surface area, the additional surface area that we had. It is a little bit juicier as well, but I'm gonna tell you what, I think both of these are gonna be phenomenal, so we might as well give it a try. I'm gonna start with the whole. I'm gonna get a nice piece of bark to go along with that. Oh, super juicy. Wow. The amount of flavor that's in that pork, especially using just such a simple Texas crunch rub with that salt, pepper, garlic, I mean, that is super tasty. Super tender, it's nice and moist. Now let's get into this butterflied. Let's give this a try. Taste is very similar, texture is a little different. This one itself is a little softer, and I think that attributes to being in that rendered down fat a little bit more and really soaking in those extra juices. Both of these are phenomenal. You can't go wrong with either, and honestly, bone in, boneless, doesn't matter. You can follow the same principles to make a pulled pork or pork shoulder, smoked pork butt, whatever you want to call it, and I'm gonna tell you what, it's gonna turn out phenomenal. If you like great barbecue and you like this recipe, be sure to hit the like button and follow along next time by hitting the subscribe button. And I'll see you next time at Anderson's Smoke Show.